There you are.
How's it going?
Good. How are you this morning, man?
Doing good.
Well, I am actually back in Montana. My family and I rented a van and we're driving from Bozeman to Coeur d'Alene. So I've been blessed enough that Dustin up here at Mountain Tough let me crash the podcast studio yet again to actually interview you from here. So
Sweet.
Thanks for bearing with the quick change, man.
All good.
Where in the world are you right now?
I'm at home in San Diego, California.
Awesome, man. Well, hey, thank you so much for doing this interview. Man, we're just going to jump right in here. We've all heard this story, or at least a lot of us heard the story of Sonny Vaccaro. When he's trying to sign Jordan to Nike, he had to fly to his mom's house to convince him. And man, we've wanted to have you on the cover of Hook and Barrel for quite some time. You've been an integral part of my journey as an entrepreneur. And I always said one of these days I'm going to get that guy on my cover. And you've been a tough target to track down. And I remember I was up here at Mountain Tough last time, and I was laying on the couch ready to go home. I'm like, man, JOCKO is 45 minutes up the road at Total Archery Challenge. If I don't go and at least ask him, I will feel like the biggest POS out there that he was right there. So I canceled my flight and flew up there. And so just like the Sonny Vaccaro flying and canceling and having to go ask Jordan's mom, I was like, that's the story that was reiterated to me when I was reading a book I was reading at the time. So when I first caught up with you, man, did you think I was a stalker, or were you at least impressed that I went for that extra effort? I was like, he's either going to think I'm crazy or he's going to think I'm nuts.
It's all good, man. I appreciated the fact that you came up and introduced yourself and you canceled your flight or whatever. That's all good. I appreciate it, man.
Good. I was like, I was hoping I didn't scare you off. So first off, as I was preparing for this interview, you are an entrepreneur, you are a Navy SEAL, you are a author, you are so many different things. How would you say you classify yourself, or do you have, or do you even pigeonhole yourself that way? How would you describe exactly what you are?
I think I'm just me. I really don't think too much about the fact that I am one thing or I am another thing. Of course, the most probably prominent thing in my life was being in the SEAL teams and being a frogman. That's the most prominent thing. That's the thing that I grew up in the SEAL teams as a young kid, and so that had the biggest influence on me. But, I also retired, 13, 14 years ago. So I'm not holding on to that. I got to move on. So that's what I did when I retired from the Navy and from the SEAL teams. I looked for the next mission, and it was a rough day cleaning out my locker for the last time and turning in my badge. So I couldn't get into the command anymore. It's just the way it goes, though. You got to move on, and that's what I did.
That's a tough transition for a lot of veterans. I've worked with a lot of veterans in the past that when they get out, they're really lost for that identity. So obviously you've capitalized on it. And part of this interview really is about truly empowering people to find out what the next step is and how to empower themselves. And that's something that you definitely did. When you first wrote Extreme Ownership, what was the motivation behind that book? Obviously you had got out of the teams. Was this something that you've always wanted to do, is to be an author about leadership, or what was the motivation behind the book?
So actually, when I retired from the teams, I immediately, actually even before I retired, I had been asked by a friend of mine that owned a big company. He said, can you come talk to my executive team about leadership? I ended up going and talking to his team. And when I got done talking to his executive team, he came up to me and said, I want you to talk to every division I have in the company. So, I told him, hey, I'm retired. And he said, I'll pay you. So that seemed like a good idea. So I started traveling around the country talking to all of his different divisions. And as I did that, one of the divisional meetings I was at, the CEO of the parent company was there. And he came up to me when he was done. And he said, I want you to come and talk to all my CEOs. And he owned about 45 or 50 companies at the time. So he set up a big CEO summit. I went and talked to all those companies. When I did that, although a bunch of those CEOs came up to me and asked me to come and talk to their companies. And so I started doing that. And I actually started getting a pretty high demand signal. So I reached out to my brother, Leif Babin, who I'd served with in the SEAL teams. And I said, hey, man, I need some I need some support over here. Can you help me out? And he said, sure. And we started traveling around the country, and we were working with a bunch of different companies. And as we did that, there was people that would say, hey, do you have this stuff written down anywhere? Do you have any notes you can give us? And we looked at each other. There was a pretty strong demand signal for a written version of what we were talking about. So we put together sort of the fundamental principles of combat leadership. And when we did that, it got into the hands of a literary agent who said, hey, this is a book. And so we put a little more time and effort into it, and that ended up being the book Extreme Ownership. So it didn't come out until about 5 years after I retired. It certainly wasn't anything that I thought I was going to be doing. And as much as I spent my career in the SEAL teams coming up with plans and contingency plans and tactical plans and operational plans and strategic plans, none of that was remotely planned when I exited the Navy. I was going to retire. I was going to surf. I was going to hang out with my wife and kids and go to wrestling matches. That's what I was planning to do.
Did you ever think it was going to become a New York bestseller, New York Times bestseller?
You know, you never know. I certainly, when it came out, I had no idea that it was going to be as big of a book as it ended up being. And it just struck a chord with a lot of people. And then we were able to follow that up with quite a few other books that have really done well. So I've been pretty lucky in the book writing department.
Yeah, you definitely have. Well, it definitely struck a chord with me. It definitely changed my life. And what I find actually was really humbling is I told you that story when I met you up in Big Sky, and you're like, hey, that wasn't me, that was you. And I thought that was pretty profound. And then as I watched more videos and prepared for this interview, you say that to a lot of people. And I knew, I was like, man, maybe I'm not the only guy that came up to him kind of gushing about how his book changed their life. And that it was the same response you had across the board, which was really cool. Speaking of becoming a New York Times bestseller, one of the things that I struggle with in my life, and I think a lot of people do, is celebrating that win. They have this goal and they get there. And when they're like these alpha motivated, kind of guys, they get that win and they move on to the next one. How do you celebrate a win? Do you purposely stop and say, hey, I've achieved this goal, I'm going to savor this moment, or are you right on to the next one?
I don't really think too much about it. I kind of just keep going. I'm not super concerned with stuff because I do plenty of things that no one knows about, doesn't matter, and I'm just doing them because I like to do them. And so I don't think too much about what's considered a win. For me, internally, if I do something I was supposed to do, I feel good about it and I move on. That's about it. I don't have any kind of profound celebratory techniques.
Well, let's talk about your early life. So in a lot of interviews, you said, being a commando is something I always wanted to be. And I searched for more and more interviews where maybe you had given a reason or something that touched you or something that in your youth. But I never really found that. So what planted that seed in you that you wanted to be a Navy SEAL?
It's the only thing I actually remember wanting to do, not so much specifically being in the SEAL teams, but wanting to be some kind of a soldier, some kind of a commando I don't know where it comes from. I always assume that there's a certain group of people that that's what they want to do. Just like I meet people that their whole life they wanted to be a banker, they wanted to be a salesperson, they wanted to swing a hammer on a construction site, they liked machinery, so they want to be a diesel mechanic. I mean, I meet people like that. That's what they want to do. And for me, I always just wanted to carry a machine gun and get after it. And so that's what I always wanted to do. And it just was a matter of time before I figured out what the SEAL teams were as I looked at the different branches of service, looked at the Marine Corps, looked at the Army, and eventually found out about the SEAL teams. And when I found out about the SEAL teams, I grew up in New England. I grew up in the water. And so having an opportunity to be in the maritime component of special operations, it seemed like the SEAL teams was a pretty obvious choice for me.
So what was young JOCKO like before the military?
Pretty average kid. I definitely was fairly rebellious. I liked hardcore music. I was getting into fights and things like that. And then as I got older, well, as soon as I joined the military, I kind of grew up a little bit and started trying to become a little bit more squared away. But yeah, young JOCKO was just a normal kid. I was a average athlete. I was average in school. I didn't study very hard, and I never really focused completely on anything until I got into the military. And what was nice about it is when you join the military, it becomes very clear. There's a very clear path on what you need to do to be successful, to be good. And as soon as I saw that path, I said, okay, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to work hard. And starting in boot camp, they want you to fold your clothes a certain way. Okay, I got it. They want you to make your bed a certain way. Okay, I got it. They want you to floss your teeth every night. That's one of the things they want you to do. So I floss my teeth every night, and I floss my teeth every night to this day. So I just kind of got on board with the program when I joined the military, and then showed up to SEAL training. And again, it's about not quitting, and that's probably one of the few skills that I had, was that I am a hard worker and I wasn't going to give up and don't need much sleep. So those are a pretty good combination going through SEAL training. And then get to the SEAL team, and what you realize during SEAL training and when you show up at a SEAL team is the primary quality as a SEAL is to be humble and put the team first. And if you do that, you're going to be in a good spot.
Did you have any mentors?
Oh yeah, the SEAL teams is surrounded with people that advise you and slap you upside the head when you do something stupid and encourage you when you're doing something right. So I had a ton of mentors, and no one that ever, I never used that term. I never thought about that term. No one ever used that term to me, but that's just the way the SEAL teams is, especially when I came in, and it not even especially. The SEAL teams is on the job training. You're going to get taught the skill and the trade by the guys that are senior to you. And so that's where you learn it from. That's where you learn the job. There's some tactical manuals, but there's no real manuals. You're going to learn how to clear a room from the guys that came before you. You're going to learn how to do an immediate action drill from the guys that came before you. You're going to learn how to shoot your weapon from the guys that came before you. So the entire career of a SEAL is learning from the people that came before you.
Tell me your first instance of true leadership that you experienced.
Yeah, really everything that you're doing when you're in the SEAL teams, you're in a leadership position, even when you're not in charge of anyone else. But even in my first platoon, I was the primary radio man. And so right out of the gate, I was putting together the communications plans for our training operations and briefing, the senior leadership at the team on what the communications plans were. So that's right there. Even though I was subordinate to, let's say, my platoon chief or my platoon commander, nonetheless, I am briefing them and leading them in the right direction to execute our communications portion of the operation in a positive way. So what you're doing out of the gate is you're building relationships and you're working with other people. And really, ultimately, that's what leadership is. It doesn't matter where you are in the chain of command, whether you're the most junior guy, and I was the youngest, most junior guy in my first 2 SEAL platoons, and you still are leading because you've got to get people going in the right direction. And then I went all the way up, through being a E5 mafia guy, and then becoming an officer and being assistant platoon commander, and then a platoon commander, and then eventually troop commander. So you're in a leadership position the whole time you're in the SEAL teams, and it would be impossible for me to think of the time where I felt I was leading for the first time, because it's what you're doing when you're in the teams.
Makes a lot of sense. So currently I'm reading a book by Michael Easter called The Comfort Crisis. Do you think America has a comfort crisis?
I think some people might. I'm sure there's some people that might have some kind of a comfort crisis, but I hang around with a bunch of people that do jujitsu. I hang around with a bunch of people that do very strenuous workouts. I hang around with a bunch of people that hike around in the mountains and hunt animals. I hang around with a bunch of people that paddle out surfing on big days. I hang around with a bunch of people that do things all the time that are not comfortable. That's who I know. So as far as there being a comfort crisis in America, maybe there's some people that are part of that. I know that I'm
You're just
not.
opting out.
I know that my friends aren't. I know that my family is not. You know, my family all trains jiu-jitsu. My family all works out. My family all does, does very active things that are not comfortable. So I'm sure there's some people out there, but I don't know any of them.
I look at your Instagram every day, 4:30. This kind of goes back to the comfort crisis thing. Why are we waking up and or working out so early?
You know, it's a habit that I got into in the SEAL teams. Believe it or not, in the SEAL teams, even though there's time allotted for physical training, you don't always get the best physical training through what you're doing with the SEAL teams. And there are many times when physical training gets bumped because you have to prepare for a dive, you have to prepare for a training mission, or you're also, there's a huge amount of, I hate to say it, there's a huge amount of administrative work that is required when you're in the SEAL teams, whether it's writing operational risk management forms or emailing your senior leadership about a training trip that you want to set up. So there's a lot of administrative things that have to be done inside the SEAL teams. And one thing that I realized was if I waited until the end of the day, let's say, oh, I'll work out during lunch or I'll work out in the afternoon, a lot of times that would just be overcome by events. And the lunchtime one, you end up getting a meeting or someone stops by to talk to you and you have to go into some details. And then in the afternoon, maybe get a call from my wife and she can't pick up the kids for whatever reason. So now I got to pick up the kids. And you realize that if you want to get some things done, I would get up before anyone else was up and go to work before anyone else was there. I don't have to worry about anyone interrupting my workout at 5 o'clock in the morning because no one's there. I don't have to worry about anybody sending me an email because no one's there. So I just went to work early so I could get stuff done before anyone else was there. And really a lot of this started even when I was a young SEAL because I wanted to be prepared. I didn't want to let my team down. I didn't want to let my platoon down. And so I would just show up early. And I had a roommate for 8 years and he's a awesome guy and he was an awesome SEAL, and we would just go to work as early as we could in the morning. We'd try and beat the Master Chief there. The Master Chief would get there early and we'd get there earlier than him, and that just kind of set us up for being more prepared for the day. So I think just getting up early in the morning gives you the opportunity to get a little jump start and get ahead. And for someone like me that's average at best, I'm going to need that little extra edge, so I get up early.
And it sounds like a lot of discipline. Obviously, I've listened to a ton of your stuff and read a lot of your stuff. So discipline is a core pillar in your life. What's the difference between motivation and discipline?
Well, motivation is just it's an emotion. It's a feeling. Hey, I'm really excited to do this today. Hey, I'm really fired up. But you can't count on that. Just like any other emotion, it's fleeting. It may be there. It may not be there. So you can't count on it. But discipline, when the alarm clock goes off, you get out of bed, you go do what you're supposed to do. You can absolutely rely on discipline. So I think discipline is the way to go and is the thing that you can rely on because you control it.
So if we're not improving, in my opinion, we're dying. We always need to be moving forward. What are you doing right now to improve yourself? Even you have to improve. What's your focus right now?
My focus is get stronger, get faster, get smarter, get better at jiu-jitsu, get better at playing guitar, get better at surfing, and learn more about human nature and interacting with other human beings.
I couldn't imagine JOCKO, the guitar player. You're always so intense. I couldn't imagine just sitting there playing guitar. Is that your way to kind of decompress and come off of the day, or is this something that's always been in you, or is this something you picked up to cope with stress? Or talk to me a little bit about the guitar playing.
I'm not very good at guitar playing, but I do enjoy it, and I've been playing for a really long time, and I've been at the same level for a really long time. The only time I actually concentrated and improved and technically got better and learned more was during COVID. So I just had a little bit more time. But yeah, I mean, I love playing guitar. You know, I have a little rock and roll band and we play. And so,
Oh, that's cool.
yeah,
What's the name of the band?
guitar's awesome. What's that?
What's your band name?
Well, the band name, it's got a guy named Trevor, a guy named Scott, and a guy named Drew. And so the band name used to be JOCKO and the STDs for Scott, Trevor, and Drew. And then we picked up a bassist that took over, and the bassist moved to rhythm guitar, and his name was Pete. So then it became, and it currently exists for the past several years as JOCKO and the PTSDs. So that's where we're at.
Wow. Okay. That ties it all together. That's a lot better than the STDs.
Yeah, I know. It's a little bit nicer, a little bit more family friendly.
Yeah, it could definitely be on the marquee in front of a theater. A lot easier than the STDs. So we know a lot of your strengths. If we've read your books and listened to your podcasts across the all the different platforms you've been on, but we don't hear a whole lot about weaknesses and flaws. And I think a lot of times in leadership, you kind of need to know where your shortcomings are. If you had to say one of the ones you've been working on to improve and to overcome, what are one of those that you're still looking at?
Well, that's the thing with leadership and with being a human being is in the book, The Dichotomy of Leadership, we just talk about balance and how you can be, either a micromanager and you go too far and you're too controlling, or you can go too far in the other direction where you're too laissez-faire and you're too hands-off, or you can, as a leader, you can talk too much and communicate too much, or you can talk too little or communicate too little, or you can plan too much and overcomplicate things, or you can plan too little and no one really knows how to conduct the operation or the mission or the task. And so the fact of the matter is, it's difficult to maintain balance. So for me, I'm always off balance, and I'm always trying to course correct and make sure that I'm in that middle zone where I'm not going too extreme in one direction or the other. And you can talk about this with anything. You can talk about this, sure, with leadership. I have a tendency to be very hands-off and very laissez-faire, so I have to make sure that I'm leaning in and connected with the team and what's happening. And I can still go too far in that direction. But even physically, you get to a point where you're trying to get strong, you're trying to get bigger, and maybe go too far, and now you can't run as fast as you should be able to run. So I'm constantly trying to maintain balance and trying to find a good middle ground where I'm most capable in a multitude of different directions.
And you've spoke at this ad nauseum, given the books you've written and again the interviews you've been on. But for our readers, give me the short definition. What's JOCKO's definition of leadership?
My definition of leadership is building relationships with a group of people who will then try and accomplish a task or a mission in the most efficient and effective way possible, using the minimum force required to get that task or mission done.
How does that translate to self-leadership? I think a lot of people in this country don't know how to lead themselves.
One of the key components that I think is important to recognize is when it comes to leading people, other people. So if I'm leading you, John, and there's a task that we have to get done, let's say it's, hey, we gotta move these concrete blocks from the road into the foundation that's been dug so we can start laying these blocks tomorrow. I'm going to tell you that. I'm not just going to say, hey, John, move these blocks. I'm going to say, hey, John, here's what's going on. We've got to move these blocks. We've got to get them in position because tomorrow we're going to have the concrete show up and we want to be able to get these things started really early in the morning. And you say, hey, got it. I understand. It's important that you also explain to yourself why you're doing what you're doing. Because if you're just out working and you don't understand what the long-term goal is, eventually that grind will wear you down. Whereas if you understand why you're doing what you're doing, you understand what you're trying to accomplish in the long run, then the grind will sharpen you like it sharpens an axe. So I think it's very important to understand for a team to understand why they're doing what they're doing, but also for you as an individual to understand why you are doing what you're doing. What is the end goal? What is the end state? What is the overall intent of the path that you are on?
How does that self-talk, that self-doubt, that little voice in your head play into that equation? And how do you shut that voice up?
Well, the little voice that's in your head is really, really crafty and really, really smart and very good at rationalizing things. And it actually knows and understands exactly what your areas of weakness are. And it can tell you the things that you want to hear better than anyone. And the way that I handle that voice when it starts talking to me is I just tell it to shut up. You don't get any vote here.
Is that easy for you?
Yes.
Wow, that's incredible. It's incredible. I'll tell you, when I'm racing and stuff, one of the biggest things I have problems with is I train with headphones on, and in races I have to take, and when that voice kicks in, I tell it to shut up and I get into the song or whatever I'm listening to. But in races, I can't be running with headphones on, so I've been really trying to practice not wearing headphones. But man, when it's just me in my head, I have full blown arguments with myself. So hopefully I could elevate myself to your level of of thinking there, because it's tough. And I think a lot of people who aren't as, I guess, trained or well read or whatever as maybe I am. There are a lot of people out there that just kind of go through life and that they just follow that voice everywhere, man. It's kind of scary.
Yeah, that's disappointing, but it's so obvious to recognize that voice. Let me rephrase that. That voice will talk as if it's got your best interests in mind, but it doesn't. All it's got is your short-term interests in mind. What's going to make me feel better right now? That's all it's trying to do. It doesn't think about the why that I talked about earlier. It doesn't think about the long-term strategic goals that you're trying to achieve. It just thinks about being better right now. So tell that thing to shut up and move on and do what you're supposed to do.
You know what I find most interesting too? I've been really studying it there. I'm actually reading another one of the sequel to one of Mark Manson's books. I'm a serial reader, actually. And I think I have literary ADD, because I'll read like 5 chapters of one book and move into another one, and eventually I'll get to the end of it. But he's talking about how the feeling brain kind of leads, and it's in the driver's seat. A lot of people just chase these emotions, and how the thinking brain really is in the passenger seat. And all it's trying to do is make sure that emotional decision doesn't careen the car off the road. But really, what's even scarier, and I've noticed this with a lot of people, and maybe you have too, where they're making emotional decisions, but then the thinking side of their brain, the rational side of their brain, is starting to rationalize and convince itself that these emotions are what they should be doing. Like, you should be quitting, or maybe you should move in with this guy you just met last week, or all these little things. It's amazing how our human brain works that way. We oftentimes listen to that voice, and then the rational side will then rationalize itself into that emotional thinking, which then makes the thinking brain think that's actually what the rational thing to do is.
Yeah, really, it's the difference. In the military, you'd call it tactical thinking versus strategic thinking. So tactical is what we're doing right now, right in front of us, and strategic is where this is going to end up in the long term. And we make a lot of decisions, unfortunately, based on short-term rewards. Like, I'm going to feel better if I eat this donut right now, or in your case, I'm going to feel better if I just stop running, or whatever. I'm going to feel better if I stay in bed right now. And all those are just short-term rewards. Whereas in each of those cases, long-term, the donut is not good for you. Long-term, it's better if you keep running. Long-term, it's better if you get up and go get your day started. So for me, it's just about shutting down the short-term thinking and think of things in a strategic long-term manner is going to be very beneficial.
Now, one of my points for this interview, I really want to empower our readers. That's why I'm asking these kind of series of questions, just to kind of set this up. But in my opinion, one of the toughest jobs, and probably the second most patriotic thing you could do, because in life, is become an entrepreneur. First being serving our country. And I think that you guys serve this country to give us the freedoms to live the lives that we want to live. And I think a lot of people are oftentimes stuck in these 9-to-5 jobs where they're truly not free. They just kind of work. Either that's the box they like to be in. But there's so many people that look at guys like you who've started great companies. Talk to me about entrepreneurship. First off, is entrepreneurship truly freedom?
So first of all, you got to remember that most people in the country are hardworking people that do work jobs from 9 to 5 or 7 to 4 or 7 to 7. That's the majority of the people. I work with and meet with these people all the time, whether they're police officers on shift, whether they're people in a manufacturing plant, whether they're people out on the oil rigs or even in the office jobs, they're working in a cubicle. And interestingly, I hear people say that, oh, these people are stuck in these positions. Most people, that's what they do for a living, and it's they got a job that they were interested in. And the people that I work with and all the time, I have a leadership consulting company called Echelon Front, and they're excited to be on the job site. They're excited to go into the plant and work. They're excited to design and build things. They're excited to go out and sell their product. So I don't think that there's this huge group of people that are just all depressed about their job. I mean, I have people that send me pictures of their plumbers, and they send me pictures of a complex water heater that they put in. They had to do a bunch of soldering with a bunch of pipe to get it around some part of the foundation, and it's really clean looking. Or an electrician that just installed a sub panel and all the wires are dialed in and everything looks squared away. So I see people that take pride in their work all the time, and that's what I think is the driving force of America, is people that really work hard to do a good job in what they're doing. And then, of course, yeah, there's entrepreneurship, and I certainly have started a few companies. And the reason that I started a lot of these companies is to give people the opportunity to find a job that they like, to do a job that gives them gratification because they're making a great product and they're developing or they're bringing manufacturing back to America, or they're doing a job that people haven't done in America for a long time, whether that's weaving material or making boots or creating product for the supplement industry. Like, these things are awesome jobs, and people do a great job in those jobs, and they're excited about those jobs. So I think having a job in America is what makes America great. And as far as me starting companies, I just saw opportunities, and I saw some gaps in various industries that I thought, hey, there's an opportunity to do something a little better here and bring something to market that doesn't exist right now. So, I have a leadership consulting company called Echelon Front, and that's what we do. We teach the principles, the leadership principles that we learned on the battlefield, but they translate perfectly into any leadership position. We have Origin USA, where we're manufacturing clothes from American-made materials, 100% American-made materials, 100% American-made product. That just didn't exist. So having the opportunity to now have 400 or 500 employees that are out there that are sewing and cutting and creating and building products is amazing. And then, of course, with JOCKO Fuel, we've got products that did not exist, supplement products that did not exist. We put the absolute best ingredients into our products, and that just didn't exist before. So yeah, if there's an opportunity, or if there's a hole in the market, and you as a human think, oh, I think I could do something to help out here, by all means, go for it. I think that's outstanding. Also, if you have a skill set, or you enjoy doing something, like I said, whether that's working on a diesel engine, or that's doing the accounting for someone. The accountant that works for me loves accounting. I mean, he puts together whole books about the financial situation that's going on for me and in the world. He absolutely loves it. So I think work and building and growing and putting everything you've got into your job, I think, is outstanding. Whether you're an entrepreneur or whether you're a frontline laborer on a construction site, I say go get after it.
I think that's great perspective.
And, growing up, I worked I worked at Wendy's. I worked in a bunch of restaurants as a dishwasher. I eventually got a job working construction, and then thankfully I was able to join the Navy. When you join the Navy, you have to have an entrepreneurial. When you get the SEAL teams, you have to have an entrepreneurial mindset because you want to figure out unique ways of getting the job done. But also, you are a blue collar worker out there fixing engines, out there loading pallets, out there cleaning weapons. These are all just hands-on jobs. It's labor, it's work. And luckily for me, I love doing that work. So that's what I think. There's people that they have that entrepreneurial mindset, which means they figure out the best way to get a job done. Even if you've worked with a contractor, you work with a carpenter. A carpenter has a skill set, and they use their entrepreneurial mind to figure out the best way to build a deck or frame up a house. And same thing with people that are out there pouring concrete. Like, there's an art to tying rebar and getting it done in a timely manner. And if you talk to a good iron worker that's out there tying rebar, they love doing that job. It's a great job. So yeah, I think it's definitely part of to me, a great part of America that people are so engaged in their jobs and they work so hard. And then people that, if they're good business owners, then they take care of their people and you end up with a win-win on both sides.
Well, let's talk about some of your top advice here. One I'm going to jump to is something that I selfishly learned a ton from you, and it was very simply put. It was in your leadership strategies and tactics book when you talked about stepping off the firing line and just taking one step back from the action to gain a bigger perspective of what's going on around you. Can you expand upon that? I think a lot of times we get so head down, butt up in the action that we're in that we struggle to separate ourselves and take that step back. I think a lot of people could benefit from that. Can you expand upon that for us?
Yeah, it's a technique that basically I call detachment, which is detaching from the chaos and detaching from the mayhem and detaching from your own emotion and your own ego so that you can see clearly what's happening. And the example I use in the book is, on a skirmish line with a SEAL platoon and waiting for someone to make a call. And I was a new guy, so I'm not the one that should have been making a call. And time passes, like 30 seconds, 40 seconds, 50 seconds, a minute. No one's making a decision. And at some juncture, I just step back off the firing line and I look around and I see that everyone on the firing line is looking down their weapons, looking through their scope or looking down their sights. We didn't have scopes at that time on those particular weapon systems, but everyone's looking down their sights and they're scanning for targets, and no one was looking at the big picture of what we should do. And so even as a new guy, I was able to figure out what the next tactical call should be. And so I made the call, and the platoon executed the call. And when we got done and we got into the debrief, this was just a training mission. This was in the 90s. There's no war going on. When we got done and we got to the debrief, I thought my platoon chief or my platoon commander was going to tell me, hey, you need to keep your mouth shut, new guy. But instead, my platoon chief said, hey, good job on making that call. And that felt pretty good, except for the fact I wondered, wait, why didn't my leadership, who has more experience than me, why weren't they able to make the call? And I realized it was because I took a step back and looked around. And that became my operational mode from then on, which was, when there's something happening, don't go closer to it, actually step away from it so you can see what's happening. Now, do you occasionally have to step into a problem to grab a hold of something? Yes, you do. Absolutely. Were there times on the battlefield where I went and cleared a building or cleared rooms by myself or was in the front of the train? Yes, there's times where you have to do that. You don't want to go by yourself, by the way. Did I clear some rooms by myself? Yes, I did. Did I want to? No. But occasionally you got to get it done. So, but that's not optimal. And as soon as I had the opportunity, I'd take a step back and someone would take my place and they'd cover down on whatever threats there were. And I could go back to looking around and trying to figure out what the next move is going to be. So you're not going to find the solution to a problem in that problem. You have to step out of that problem, look around, see the bigger picture so you can figure out where you're going to go forward.
Now that's a great piece of self-leadership advice right there. Give me two more. If you had to say that and two other, some 3 great pieces of self-leadership advice.
Take ownership of what's happening. So that's the name of the first book that we wrote, was Extreme Ownership. And, you know, someone like you, John, when you come up and talk to me, you're like, hey, your book changed my life. And I, of course, as you mentioned earlier, I'm going to say, no, you changed your life, and you changed your life by actually taking ownership of what is happening. It is so easy to sit around and say, it was my parents' fault. It was my parents' fault. It was my teacher's fault. It was my school's fault. It was my coach's fault. It was my girlfriend's fault, my boyfriend's fault, my husband's fault, my wife's fault. It's everyone else's fault, my boss's fault, my team's fault. And you can blame other people all day long. And when you're blaming other people, you're not making any changes because they're not under your control. So
is that where most people fail in life? They put the blame somewhere else and then look at themselves in the mirror?
Absolutely. That's absolutely right. So when you take ownership and you say, oh, I didn't get a good grade in this class, not because of the teacher, but because of me. I didn't study hard enough. I didn't form a relationship with my teacher, so I understood what was going on. When you blame your parents for the amount of, you could have done better in sports if your parents would have been more supportive. Guess what? Doesn't matter. If you would have practiced more, you would have been more successful, and you would have gotten to where you wanted to get to. And it's the same thing with your boss. Oh, my boss didn't promote me. Well, do a better job and make it undeniable that you are the one that should be promoted. Or your business failed because the competition, came in and undercut your price. Okay, well then you didn't figure out a way to either make your product so much better that people would still pay for it, or get the price down on your product so that more people would buy it. The more you sit around and blame other people, the less control you have, and therefore you go backwards in life. When you step up, when you take ownership, then you can make the changes that you need to make. So that's the second piece of advice. So I think we got detachment, we got take ownership. And then finally, the book that I wrote called Discipline Equals Freedom, which we've already talked about discipline. If you want freedom in your life, the best way to get there is through discipline. If you want financial freedom, then you need to have financial discipline. If you want to have more free time, you need to have more disciplined time management. If you want more physical freedom to be able to move around and lift heavy things, then you need to have more physical discipline. If you want to be smarter and have more intellectual freedom, then you've got to have the discipline to educate yourself. So if you want more freedom in life, you need to get more discipline.
True. Discipline is the key to everything. And I think that's why I'm trying to set the foundation early with my son. I might be tough on him. He might only be 4.5. And sometimes I kind of feel like a jerk that he's only that young, but I know that I'm planting that seed, and that foundation sucks right now for him. But when he's 10, 12, and he's trying to make that team, or we got him into jiu-jitsu when he first turned 4. He now he has all 5 stripes plus a red stripe on his white belt, which
right on.
He'll come up behind me and lock me up and put his knee in the back of my back and lean back. And good thing I know to duck my neck. Otherwise I'm going to get choked out by a 5-year-old. But I keep telling him, do hard things, discipline, do the same thing. I make him make his bed every morning. I try.
Yep.
It's kind of hard with a toddler, but
yep.
Anyway,
you
I
just
digress.
Want to remember that your kids are going to be who they are, not who you want them to be. And you certainly can steer them. If you go too, if you're tyrannical with your kids will rebel against you, just like your employees were. If you're a tyrannical leader on a SEAL platoon and you're yelling and screaming and you only accept the way that you want, your platoon is going to rebel against you. You probably read that story I wrote in Leadership Strategy and Tactics. We had a tyrannical leader.
Yep.
We rebelled against him. We got him fired. We had a good leader that listened to us, that treated us with respect. We love that guy. We'd follow him anywhere. So as you're raising your son, I got 4 kids, and I was very cautious about talking about my kids when they were younger, because, I would say, hey, the jury's not out yet. We don't know how they're going to turn out. But now my kids are all older. They're in their 20s, and they're all squared away. So, and I made some mistakes along the way. One of them, I really pushed them hard to do jiu-jitsu, and I forced jiu-jitsu down their throats. And when you force things down people's throats, they reject it. It doesn't matter if it's what's your favorite food to eat?
My favorite food?
Yeah.
Burritos.
So if I just started shoving burritos down your throat, eventually you would throw them back up. You would reject them. Well, it's just like anything else with our employees, with our team, with our spouse, with our kids. If you force things down their throat, they'll eventually reject them. So as you're bringing your kid up, it's best to make things as fun as possible. You want jiu-jitsu to be fun. You want working out to be fun. You want cleaning your room to be fun. You want these things to be fun. You want them to be rewarded. You want them to be rewarded by having more autonomy in how they operate, and that becomes very, very beneficial.
Man, well, I'm going to skip over a little section here. Then, since we started touching on family here, family businesses have their challenges. I'm running one myself, and I'm trying to do my best to raise my son, and that was all great advice and a great reminder to me. How have you and your wife made things work for the best results, and are your children involved in your businesses?
So, yeah, my wife and we've been married for a long, long time, over a quarter century at this point. She obviously did a lot of combat deployments at home when I was overseas, and she was a saint and a trooper then, and handled everything on the home front, from broken water heaters to getting the kids' grades, maintaining, make sure they're all squared away, to getting the kids to every wrestling practice, jiu-jitsu practice, surf team, dance recital, gymnastics event. She did all that. So she was really, we had a very good, pretty clearly delineated roles and responsibilities. And that's how we operated, and that's how we still operate. We obviously we work together on a ton of things with the family, but she handles a whole section of our lives, and I handle a whole other section of our lives. So I think just having that good communication and being in the roles that fit you well has worked really well for us. And yeah, I have my oldest daughter. She went to college, and when she studied economics in college and data science, and she now works at JOCKO Fuel on the e-commerce team doing e-commerce and data analytics. And then my next daughter, she is a competitive jiu-jitsu fighter, and she teaches jiu-jitsu and wrestling at my gym, Victory MMA and Fitness, in San Diego, California.
That's awesome. Before we jump out of there really quick, proudest dad moment.
Proudest dad moment?
Yeah. What's the...
I got 4 kids. There's no way I could figure out one moment being prouder than some other moment. My oldest daughter, she got into one of the best colleges in the country, and that was pretty awesome. There's great moments for all my kids, and I think probably if I had to say, when I quietly nod my head is when everyone in my family is all heading to jiu-jitsu to train together. So we say fam jitsu, and usually every so often, because the kids are older now, we have a good fam jitsu day, and we all will train jiu-jitsu together at the gym, and then we'll probably do some kind of sauna, ice bath, pool scenario after that, and it's pretty fun. So I enjoy that a lot.
That's cool. Well, we're going to jump into the fun stuff here with hunting in 1 second, but I'd be doing myself a disservice here. This is something you don't hear a whole lot of people talk about in the business world. They always want to talk about how they get there and what they did to get there, but they really don't talk. They don't get down to dollars and cents. And you've started a lot of great companies. You've invested in companies like Origin, JOCKO Fuel. We've talked about Echelon Front. What are the top 3 investments that make you money right now?
Well, you just said them. It's
just those companies. Yeah.
Echelon Front, JOCKO Fuel, Origin. I have a small publishing company, but I've also written a bunch of books for a bigger company. I have a movie coming out based on the kids' books that I've written. That's going to be filming this summer, and it will.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So, pretty much everything I do, I have a podcast that's pretty popular, and that drives a lot of the business for everything. So I think it's just kind of a holistic approach. I kind of do the things that I'm interested in, and talk about the things that I'm interested in, and I think it's been pretty beneficial across the board from a financial perspective.
When you look at the ledger sheet, what are you spending the most money on?
What do I spend the most money on?
Whether it be business, personal. When you look at it, you're like, man, for me, it's nutrition and health. I look at my bottom line. I'm like, man, this is a huge category in my life that I'm investing a lot of money in. I'm spending a lot of money in. When you look at your life,
I'm probably pretty similar in the fact that I like food, and I like to, it's a little cheaper for me, I guess, since I own the supplement company that I buy supplements from. So I
yeah,
guess
right.
I guess I can beat you there, but I don't. Honestly, I don't. I'm not. I'm not too crazy spending a crazy amount of money. I'm pretty. I got some nice guitars. I got some nice surfboards. Um, I that's kind of what I'm into. So, I have a bunch of jiu-jitsu gis, obviously, but those are all part of Origin. I have hunt gear, but that's all part of Origin. Like I said, the supplements that I use, I make. So yeah, I'm not really too. I drive a Jeep Grand Cherokee. It's like pretty normal dude, I guess.
Yeah. In high school, I read a book called The Millionaire Next Door, and I think I graduated in '03. But according to that book, the most millionaires in the United States drive Jeep Grand Cherokees. It's an interesting stat. I don't know if it holds true, but I always have to laugh when I see the guys with the McLarens. I'm like, I know you're leasing that.
Yeah, that's probably not the best investment in the world.
No, not at
McLarens are
all.
nice cars and everything, but
Yeah, exactly. Speaking of that, if you were to go invest in something, how do you determine if it is a good investment? Obviously you invested in Origin, and that's a question I actually have. That company's based in Maine. You're from Maine. You're living in San Diego now. How did you see that as a good investment to get involved in that company? How did you rediscover that? Is that something you were always aware of? Or tell me a little more about Origin as well, especially because it ties back to the camouflage side of the upcoming hunting side of this interview.
yeah. So I was doing my podcast. The podcast had become pretty popular, and I was encouraging people to do jujitsu on a regular basis, and people started asking me what kind of jujitsu gi to get. And there was a company that I had heard of and that I had followed called Origin, and they were up in Maine, the state, one of the states where I grew up in New England. And and this guy Pete was making jiu-jitsu gis in America. No one else was doing that. So I would tell people to buy Origin gis. And I actually reached out to Pete like, hey, really interested in what you're doing. And I didn't hear back from him. Finally, one day I was doing a Facebook Live, and someone asked me what kind of jiu-jitsu gi to get. And I said, yeah, get a Origin gi. They're made in America. They're the only gi made in America with 100% American made parts, because they were weaving the material. And so I said, and by the way, if anybody on this call can get a hold of this guy, Pete Roberts, please let him know I want to talk to him. A woman on the call actually ended up connecting us, and we got on a call. We talked for 4 hours on a Skype call. And when I got done, my wife said, it sounded like you were talking to yourself in there, because we were so aligned on what our vision was. So we ended up, he had this ability to manufacture, but, he's in Farmington, Maine. Population is like 7,000 there or something like that. And he just, there's only so much you can do in Farmington, Maine. And he, at the time had, we were at 8 employees when we finally shook hands and partnered up. And we just, I put the word out to people on and started explaining to them what our mission was once we partnered up. And once we partnered up and I started putting the word out, we started selling a lot of gis, and then we started hiring more people to make more gis. And I think when we shook hands and partnered up, we were making about between 100 and 150 pieces a week. That's like 100, that's pants and jiu-jitsu jackets. Right now, we make probably close to 20,000 pieces a week. We have over 400 employees. And yeah, the company's grown a lot, but that's where it started from. The genesis was me trying to support an American-made company.
So how did you transition from geese and I'm sure you still make them, obviously, into camouflage? Now I see Cam Hanes running around with Origin on. I see you up Attack with Origin. So how do we go from geese to camo?
So one day I was at the airport and I was watching people and I saw that everyone was wearing jeans. And I called Pete and I said, "Hey man, how many people do you know that train jujitsu?" And he said, "What do you mean?" I said, "How many people do you actually know that train jujitsu?" And he said, "I don't know, maybe like 40 or 50. And I go, "Cool. How many people do you know that wear jeans?" And he said, "Everyone wears jeans." And I said, "Why aren't we making jeans?" And he said, "Roger that." And then, so we have another guy on board, a guy named Kit Folks, and he's one of the board members at Origin, and he's not just a board member; he's very engaged, helping with he's got a vast amount of knowledge because he was one of the founders of Under Armour, and he spent 20 plus years at Under Armour and growing that business, including creating and growing their outdoor hunting business. But so he has been on board for several years now. And as you probably know about Kip, he's an avid hunter. He's really good friends with Cam Hanes. And so when, I got into hunting, and of course, everyone in Maine is into hunting. I mean, when you're in Maine, like hunting is part of life. Everyone goes deer season. They got moose hunts and bear hunts. Like there's all kinds of hunting up in Maine. It's just part of life. And so as I started getting into hunting and started seeing what was being made, well, none of it was being made in America. So if you wanted to buy hunting gear, you were going to buy hunting gear that was made in China, who is an adversary of our country. And when you buy something that's made in China, you are actually helping our adversary, someone that potentially we could end up in war with. So, and not to mention their ideology, the communist ideology, and the way that they treat their workers and the way that they treat the environment, the way that they treat the world is just terrible. And there's no more patriotic people in America than hunters. And so the fact that hunters didn't have the option to buy something that was made in America, it definitely did not sit well with me. Well, Kip being an avid hunter, Pete being an avid hunter, so many of the guys at Origin being hunters, Kip really pushed, like, let's start a hunt line. And that's what we did. We started a hunt line. It is growing. We're getting better and better at it. We've got, manufacturers here in America of the materials that are now being very supportive. And we are just stepping up our game, and we're going to continue to make the product here in America, refine it, make it better and better all the time. And, it's like jiu-jitsu gis. Our early jiu-jitsu gis, they were very difficult to manufacture. We had to make a lot of improvements on them. And same thing with our jeans. But we're learning so quick now. So that's why we did it, was we want Americans to be able to buy American-made goods. We understand hunting. Everyone on the team, well, not everyone, but most of the people on the team are hunters, and we want to support the American way of life. And one of the premier parts of American life is hunting. So that's why we started making the hunt gear.
And kudos to you guys, because I looked at the line pretty well, and there are some things that kind of follow what just not average is the wrong word.
Normal.
What normal hunting gear is supposed to be. And then you guys have some pieces that I have not seen anything else like that. The wool stealth pants and the wool stealth jacket. That's not something I've seen. Everyone's moving to technical fibers. You guys are actually finding ways to refine traditional pieces, but make them modern. And I really liked that piece. And so shout out to you guys. It's because a lot of times you see people get into the camouflage business and they try to be the next Kuyu or the next Sitka. You guys are running in your own lane.
We are. And there's we use materials that have true benefits. And for instance, like you pointed out, our wool blends because they're blends. They're not just wool like, like I had growing up when I had to put on a wool sweater and it was freaking itchy and it was uncomfortable.
Right.
We're making things that are wool blends where we do have synthetic material woven in there that makes them comfortable, that makes them more resilient, that makes them tougher. And that's why we use the material. If the material is not functional, we're not going to use it. And luckily, quite frankly, through the military and even more specific special operations, because of the requirements for those products to be made in America, we do have some amazing technology, American made, in our materials that comes directly from the military and from the special operations, specifically community, so that we're able to take advantage of that.
So when did you get into hunting?
I think it was 3 years ago.
Wow. So you're an adult
are you
hunter.
talking about me personally, or when did we start the line?
You personally? Well, both. So 3 years ago for Origin.
So I think it was
personally get
6 years ago that I got into hunting, specifically got into bow hunting, and then from there it's just sort of become part of life.
So who got you into it, and what drew you to archery?
Well, John Dudley saw me on the Joe Rogan podcast and thought that I would really enjoy hunting. And I ran into John Dudley randomly in a New Jersey airport. And he said, "Hey, my name is John Dudley. I've been on Rogan. I'm friends with Rogan. And I think you'd really like bow hunting and archery. And I'd like to, get in touch with you about it." I said, "Sure." We sent Rogan a picture of us, in the airport. And then John Dudley, I'm the most spoiled person of all time when it comes to archery. John Dudley built me a bow, flew to San Diego, and taught me how to shoot. And so that's how it got started. And yes, I recognize and I am very appreciative of the fact that I'm the most spoiled human being when it comes to hunting and archery.
So, it's interesting. You talked about Rogan. I've spoken before on panels and I've been on other podcasts, and I've kind of deemed it a phrase. I call it the Haynes-Rogan effect. And I've seen a lot of people get involved in hunting because of those two guys, specifically Western hunting. You got all these guys down in the Southeast. It's kind of funny. They all think they're like Western hunters, and then they're in their box blinds after whitetail. Do you see the Haynes-Rogan effect, as I kind of dubbed it, really kind of pushing that? Obviously, you are a benefactor of the Haynes-Rogan effect. How much influence do you see those guys having on new hunters and the new generation, and how hunting is being portrayed in America?
Yeah, I will clearly when Rogan has Cam Haynes or John Dudley on his podcast and they talk for 2, 3, 4 hours about archery and about hunting, that's gonna land. And same thing with jiu-jitsu. There's a ton of people that started jiu-jitsu because of Joe Rogan. So do I see it? Yeah. If you go to attack and Dudley goes to a lot of the attacks, and so many of the people, they have knock-on tattoos, for his stuff. And clearly, obviously now that Cam's involved with Origin, which is awesome, people come up to me and they sing the praises of Cam Haynes. Cam Haynes is a beast. And yeah, so for me to, again, I'm the luckiest person in the world. I've been in hunt camp with Joe Rogan, Cam Haynes, and John Dudley,
Dude, that's awesome.
hanging out. Andy Stumpf, he's another person that got into hunting and has spread the word. So I think there's a lot of clearly, the term that gets used, I guess, is influencer, right? But that's a term that gets probably overused. But when you look at, if you want to talk about the influence of getting people into archery and getting people into hunting, yeah, between Rogan, Cam Haynes, and John Dudley, I'd say that is an extremely influential, literally influential group of people.
Yeah, absolutely. So talk to me about hunting. First hunt, hardest hunt, and then what do you think the true trophy in hunting is?
Yeah, my first hunt that I went on was an elk hunt. And
wow, so you start off big. You didn't start off with shooting a doe. You started off
Yeah. As a
with
matter
a
of fact,
bull elk archery.
yep. Yep.
Wow.
So it was awesome. I got a great bowl. It was great. It was, a very enlightening experience. And what I liked about it, I could tell right away that when you're no longer in the military and now you're using, it's very, in some ways, if you pick up a lot of skills in the military that might not translate that well to the civilian world. For instance, walking quietly through the woods. For instance, using cover and concealment to approach a target. For instance, understanding land navigation. For instance, understanding how to put your gear on. Staying calm in chaotic situations. Getting control of your breath while you're letting an arrow go. So there's a bunch of things from the military that translate into hunting. And I think that's one of the reasons why it appeals so much to people, to veterans and people that are in the military, because you now get to utilize these skills that you worked on and focused on for so long, and you can utilize them for a skill or for a situation that you would no longer be able to use these skills for. So that's what I noticed on the very first time. Even getting ready, when there's a lot of time in the military where you're preparing to go execute a mission, you're training to go execute a mission. And it's the same thing with hunting. You have to train, you have to prepare, you have to get all your gear ready. You have to have your weapon dialed in. You've got to train with your weapon all the time. You've got to be very confident at 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, and 100 yards and back down. You've got to be willing to take that shot and know how to take that shot and be confident that your shot is going to hit. So those things crossed over very well from my military experiences to hunting. And I think that's one of the things that makes it so enjoyable.
That makes a whole lot of sense. How does leadership change in the outdoors versus the boardroom? Do you lead yourself any differently when you're on a hunt as you're leading yourself in business?
No, it's very similar. Listen, if you're on a hunt and you get too emotional, which means you're either too excited, too nervous, you're not going to make a good shot. You're not going to do the right thing. And if you are in a boardroom and you get too excited or you get angry, you get emotional, you're not going to do a good job. You're not going to make the good decisions. So there's definitely overlap between having control of your emotions, control over your ego, being able to detach in the situation. Those things are both required in hunting and in leadership. So a lot of overlap there as well.
What's your next big hunt?
I'm not sure yet. This hunt season is a little bit sketchy right now because I've got some big projects that I probably won't be able to get out of, but I'm going to try and figure out what I can make work. We'll see. I don't have anything on the calendar right now, which is weird because in years past I've had, when I'm hunting, I already have the next year's hunt planned out. This year is the first year I don't have that, but it's due to some things in the schedule that I can't really change and I don't have much control over.
Well, the last question I have for you is, what's your biggest advice for new hunters? Obviously, you're relatively new. To people that are trying to get into it that might be a little bit later in life, what's your biggest advice for those guys or gals?
The first thing I'll say is, just like anything else, take the first step. You can sit around and look from the outside and be hesitant to get in there. I would say, and I can speak specifically really to bow hunting because that's what I've been doing. But get a bow, get somebody to show you how to shoot that bow. Go to Knock on TV. John Dudley gives every piece of information that he has. He gives away for free if you go to his YouTube channel. So there's so many resources, and the bows are so good right now. So get yourself a bow and go start shooting some targets, in the backyard. And there's a decent chance that you're gonna find it enjoyable. And keep practicing, as Cam Hanes would say, keep hammering those targets, and then start to explore, hey, if I'm into this and I'm willing to do the practice and willing to do the work, maybe I want to go out and try and harvest an animal, and then start getting that planned out. So I would say the biggest thing is get started. If it looks like fun, if you think it's going to be fun, well, that's because it is fun. And if you start shooting that bow and maybe it's not for you, okay, cool. Move on to something else. But I would say get in there. Most of the people that I've introduced to it are definitely into it, and it's good. It's really enjoyable, and it's very, very rewarding. And just so everyone knows, the reason it's so rewarding is because it is extremely hard. It is extremely hard to kill an animal with a bow and arrow, and the chances of winning. I've got friends that have gone out 3, 4, 5, 6 seasons looking for an elk, haven't taken a shot yet. It is very challenging. And by the way, you can take a shot and you can hit that elk and you can never see that elk again. It's a very, very difficult thing to do. And that's what makes it so rewarding, is you are going to work extremely hard in the preparation. You're going to dedicate hours and hours and hours to be ready for that moment. And there's no guarantee. In fact, there is a slim chance that you even get a chance to take a shot. So prepare yourself mentally for that. It's a very difficult sport. It's a very, very difficult thing to do. But I will say that is what makes it so rewarding. When you do get that shot and you make a good shot and you get that kill and you get that meat, it is extremely rewarding. But what makes it so rewarding is that you got to put in some work. Can you get lucky? I guess you can get lucky. I've heard a couple stories about people getting lucky, but if you're counting on luck, I would say go figure something else out to do. If you're not going to put in the work, if you're not going to prepare, if you're not going to be ready, don't waste your time. Don't waste the animals. Don't go out there and don't. You should be ready to make a good shot, to show that animal the respect it deserves, and take it in a suitable way. So that's what makes it so rewarding, is it is really, really hard to do. And I've been around some of the best hunters in the world, not just Cam and Joe and Dudley, but other just supremely, eminently qualified hunters, and they haven't harvested. They've wounded bulls that have gotten away. It is a really hard thing to do. So be ready to work your ass off.
So you actually answered my last question. What's the true trophy in hunting? That is the trophy. The trophy is there may not be a trophy.
Yeah, that is it. That is it. But you're going to go outside. You're going to pursue something. You're going to pursue a worthy opponent, which is in elk hunting. Those things are incredible animals. They're brutally tough. They run up mountains. It's shocking what they can do running up a mountain that would take us an hour to get up to, or get up to the top of. They'll run up that thing in a couple minutes. It's crazy how suited they are for their environment, and you're at a huge disadvantage out there trying to hunt them. And the reward is, yeah, if you get one, that's great. If not, you learned, and that's the way life is as well.